And after all these years, decades actually, my faith in God is stronger than it's ever been. But I've stepped away from that traditional institutional church structure. What happened? Why step away from the system that I grew up in? There's actually a bunch of reasons, but today I'll quickly step you through the top 15. I grew up in the traditional institutional church system. You know, going to the church building for the worship services, attending Bible class, participating in the youth programs. That's what church was. Anyone that didn't participate in church like this was considered a little weird, maybe even a little cult-like. Just so we're clear, my growing up in the traditional church structure wasn't some occasional or on again, off again thing. It was steady and consistent my entire life. I was always involved in church. And over the years took on more and more roles within the church. Bible camp counselor in my teens, youth Bible class teacher in my 20s, adult Bible class teacher in my 30s, 40s, and 50s, church deacon in my 30s and 40s, and church elder in my 40s and 50s. This wasn't some tangential or superficial part of my life. I was in the thick of it, moving through certain roles and progressing just like the model of success said I should. But in the last few years, I've become concerned about that model, concerned enough that I no longer am part of that model of doing church. I could talk at length about the things that caused me to open my eyes and start questioning some things, but I won't bore you with that sometimes painful detail. I'll just jump into the top 15 reasons why I can't in good conscience be a part of that traditional institutional approach any longer. The number one reason is not the first thing that I observed or questioned, but it certainly became the biggest reason for me to know I needed to make a change. In 1 Corinthians 14, Paul describes what the assembly of the saints should look like. In summary, it is an informal, very interactive meeting with multiple people bringing something to the meeting and others testing or verifying what they shared. Bottom line is that the traditional church system doesn't provide for a meeting of the saints that looks like this. It's formal. Only a few people, select people, speak or are given speaking roles. And perhaps most obvious of all, the vast majority of attendees are little more than spectators. That is simply not what 1 Corinthians 14 instructs. So my number one reason for not participating in that system any longer is that it doesn't align with what the Bible instructs. Number two, money. Of all the money collected by churches every year, on average, churches spend more than 75% of that money on themselves, with salaries and buildings accounting for the vast majority of that. When you dig a little deeper, you discover that less than 10% of the money collected is spent on helping the needy or spreading the gospel. Less than 10% spent on what is arguably the core mission of the church. Now, we can rationalize all day long as to why this is the case, but the fact is, this is a broken system thinking more about ourselves than others. Those two reasons alone were enough to convince me that I had to do something different. Romans 14:23 says, "For whatever does not come from faith is sin." Not assembling like is described in the Bible and spending the vast majority of our money on ourselves doesn't align with the faith in God that I read about in the Bible. I had to make a change. But those aren't the only two reasons. Let me continue with the list. Number three, Christianity is stuck in a building. Jesus said to go into the world to preach the gospel. He said not to lay up treasures on earth, like constructing big, nice buildings. He met people where they were. Seems we've thrown that out the window. For our convenience, or perhaps to impress people, we've built all these buildings and basically expect people to come to us instead of us going to them. I could go on and on with all kinds of examples of how we do this, but hopefully you get the point. Number 4, over 80% of kids that grow up regularly going to church leave the church within a year of graduating high school. It's time we stop making excuses about this. If the system we're using doesn't even retain our own kids, how delusional do we have to be to think it's going to be successful on the unchurched? This system is failing, particularly our kids. It's time we admit it. Number 5, we've made too many idols within the church. I'm talking about church things that we've made idols of. We put our preachers on pedestals and talk more about our preachers than we do about Jesus. We divide over and over again because we can't agree on what kind of music we want at church. We're more concerned about taking care of our nice church building than we are about feeding the hungry. And we defend the denomination or brand of church we go to more than we defend the glory and honor of God. Talk bad about our brand of church and we'll set you straight. Use the Lord's name in vain in front of us and most of us don't even flinch. We've set our priorities on the wrong things and turned them into idols. Number 6, our church elders spend more time being business administrators than they do being shepherds of souls. Been there, done that, and have repented and asked for God's forgiveness. But the traditional institutional system is still what it has been. Far more a business than a spiritual relationship. And the church leaders act more like business managers than shepherds serving the flock of souls. Number 7, this traditional institutional approach does not, in fact, prevent false teaching, like I've heard so many people say in defense of the current system. As a matter of fact, it may do just the opposite. This system, with its salaries and buildings and programs that they use to market themselves, all cost money. So they become dependent on their cash flow. And when you are dependent on cash flow from the people sitting in the seats, you shouldn't upset them by saying things they don't like. So you avoid certain biblical topics or spin them to make them more palatable. And it's only a matter of time until you are teaching a false gospel. Don't be naive and think this doesn't happen. It happens all the time. Number 8, the institutional church relies more on educated preachers and staff than on the Holy Spirit. Don't bother applying for some preacher job unless you have a piece of paper from some seminary, university, or preacher school. As if sitting in a classroom is the key to having a personal relationship with God and letting the Holy Spirit work in your life. The vast majority of churches have substituted a piece of paper saying you're educated for the power of the Holy Spirit. It's a real problem and it's incredibly pervasive. All right, that's just past halfway in the list. So I'm going to basically just list the remaining 7 reasons. This isn't to imply they're any less important, but I know that people's attention span on YouTube is limited. And if the first 7 reasons haven't caught your attention, it's unlikely that the remaining 7 will do so. So here goes, the final 7 reasons. Number 9, our structured auditorium-based church gatherings promote a non-participative, sit-on-your-hands environment for most church members. Number 10, the Sunday school system entices many parents to delegate teaching their kids the ways of God to a Bible class teacher instead of taking responsibility for that within the family setting. Number 11, the reliance on paid professional staff causes far too many church members to ignore their personal responsibility to witness and share the gospel and leave it only to the professionals. Number 12, relationships are frequently superficial and intermittent due to the structured time together, size of the crowd, and this auditorium-based approach. These do not promote deep personal relationships that we see described over and over in the Bible. Number 13, our consumeristic, marketing-based approach to attracting new members leads to a culture of church being something that serves us instead of us having the attitude of serving others. And this is in direct opposition to Jesus' teachings. Number 14, the Lord's Supper has been turned into a ritual instead of true breaking of bread over a meal with fellow saints sharing our lives together. Finally, number 15, the New Testament has multiple references to saints meeting in homes. It doesn't have a single instruction to pool our money to build a special building to meet in. If that's what God expected us to do, I'm confident He would have told us to do so. So those are my top 15 reasons. Some may connect with you and some may not. Some may make sense to you and some may make you angry. I'll just leave you with a question as we close. A question I wish I would have asked myself years ago. Do I do church the way I do because I'm committed to doing it the way God describes it for us in the Bible? Or because the current system is just what I'm used to and it's comfortable and convenient? Am I leaning more on commitment or convenience? There is a clear answer to this question for me, and it led me to make some needed changes. You obviously can consider all this for yourself. Thanks for listening. God bless you on your journey.